All right, we are here with the Next Play podcast. Thank you, Robert Turbin, for joining and being my very first guest. And I'm excited to do this. And we've become friends over the years. And I think most people might know you as an NFL football player. Tell us a little bit about your NFL journey. How long did you play? How'd you get into playing football?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I started playing football at 10 years old. There's a park that's down the street from my house, Irvington Park. Every Saturday, I'd be outside, I'd be playing, but I would notice that at the park, there were loud noises and screams and cheers. And I used to always, kind of be curious about what was going on down there at the park. And so this was fourth grade, actually. And so one of my good friends, longtime friends, I've known since kindergarten, his name is Justin Ramos. I asked him one day at recess, what's going on at the park? And he says, it's the Fremont Football League. You should come and play. And I got excited right away. I'm like, of course I want to play. Obviously, the season had already started. It was too late for sign-ups. But the next year, our fifth grade year, was when I got started. So I started as a 10-year-old kid. I played for the Buffalo Bills, in Pop Warner the first couple years, then the Chicago Bears when I moved up to the older division, and then went on to play high school and college and everything else. I was drafted in 2012 to the Seattle Seahawks, and I spent 8 years in the NFL throughout my career.
The point of this discussion is to talk about how you went from somebody that had to play in professional sports, which requires a lot of work ethic, a lot of exercising, obviously, hard work, building your body to be able to take on what you're doing every day, going out on the football field. I want to talk about how you got out of that to do what you're doing today. So, how would you describe what you do today from what you did before as an NFL football player?
There's some similarities, there's some parallels. I've been fortunate to be able to start a career in broadcast. I'm a color commentator in the broadcast world, and I'll do some in-studio television stuff, and I have a couple of my own radio shows with SiriusXM, and we're talking about players, and we're talking about situations and trades and, all the intricate things that may go on behind the scenes that the common listener, may not know about. And so the intriguing thing is that I get to share a lot of those scenarios from my own experiences. Where the parallels come into play is that, I got to study guys. I still have to watch tape. I still have to study new schemes and old schemes and how they relate and how teams are trying to attack each other and what blitz packages are being developed nowadays and compared to the days that I were playing, both at the collegiate and NFL level. And so, it makes for really a fascinating opportunity to not only stay in the game, is continuing to evolve.
I played basketball and obviously not nearly at the level you played football, but I always think about things like when I was younger, how I could study things today now, like you probably can today. Do you think like if my body was what it was, what I know today? Like, do you have that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'd be so much better or I'd know so much more?
Man, no doubt about it. And, from a sports standpoint, maybe not so much, but it's the things that you get involved with outside of the sport, your, financial portfolio or raising kids or, all of those things, visiting different places in the United States and how different neighborhoods are. And just like, man, if I knew some of those things before, I might be in a different spot. I might have raised my family somewhere else or etc. And so, yeah, that always comes into play as life kind of evolves.
So it's one of the things that I always think about, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show was people, you don't know what you don't know. And like that phrase sounds counterintuitive, but the reality it always sits with me is I worked at a team where a player didn't know what a 401k was,
Mhm.
right? Like, and that always sat with me. Like, how do they not know what a 401k is? But you're doing so much to get ready to be on the field. There's a lot of things that never learned, put in position to learn those things. So like you're out on the football field, you mentioned kids, like were these things you were thinking about while you were playing, or at what point did you really start to think about life after football?
Yeah, no, it started early. I did an internship for Pacific Sotheby's down in San Diego for 2 years. I started to learn about real estate. Real estate was something that always, intrigued me. I think the difference is, though, is that, even though I had the thought about what my post career would look like, it was just a thought. And I think the mistake that a lot of us make is that the thought is there, but the engagement is not. And what I mean by that is, okay, yeah, internship is great because you're active and I'm showing homes and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But am I actually starting a career in something? Am I actually really building and expanding and diversifying my portfolio? Or am I just checking a box on, experiencing something new? And that's where really the difference is in terms of like the thought and the engagement. And I think, myself and a lot of other pro athletes, we miss the engagement part because we're still so focused on the task at hand, which is our career. And it's always been that way. The only other thing that we've ever had to do was go to class. That was our big responsibility, good grades, so you can stay on the team. We didn't have to like pay taxes and do other responsible things that come outside of football, And so those are things that you talk about, you don't know what you don't know. Those are things that you don't know. Then, after the first couple years, if you weren't in a position where those lessons were presented to you from the start, then you begin from behind. So now you're 2 years
Right.
late on your taxes, because you just didn't know what you were doing from the get-go, and that could be a serious thing, right?
You mentioned taxes since we're a few days removed from tax day as we're doing this.
That's right.
What interesting thing about that too, right? Like even though I was not as focused on one particular career at the age you had to be, like I still didn't really know a lot about taxes. Mm-hmm. So there's other things there. And I think from what you just described, I think there's probably a lot of athletes that weren't thinking about life after they played. What were some of the things you saw with some of your teammates that you were like, I'm going to lean in and help them a little bit from something I'm paying attention to or that they might be able to learn from me? And maybe that was some of the younger players that came in when you'd been in the league a few years.
Yeah. One of the mistakes that I made early in my career was organizing my off season, right? So I mentioned that, before you go pro, a lot of things are sort of put in place for you. You go to practice, you go to the weight room, you go to class, and so there's really a lot of stability there for you. When you go to the pros, well, now you have to put together your own calendar and you've got to organize, 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months of your own life before you're back at the facility and you have this agenda on a day-to-day basis sort of mapped out for you. And so I think it's important when guys come into the league, what is your off season like? Where are you living? Where are you training? What is your home situation like? Because if that's not organized, then you just become discombobulated overall. That's the first thing. The second thing I encourage guys to do is find another passion that wakes you up in the morning that doesn't have anything to do with your sport, because that then could lead to an easier transition for you when that time comes. And I emphasize the when, because none of us really think our days are going to end playing football or any sport for that matter. We've been doing this forever. So those are the two things that I really harp on.
One of the parts you mentioned too about finding a hobby or doing other things, right? Like I'm in finance for my career and I'm doing this because I thought it'd be fun. But I think to a certain point, as you were talking about focusing on the football career, a phrase I've always used in the workplace is like, you got to keep the main thing, which is really what's providing for you, the family, the food on the table. And I think sometimes you can get caught up in those fun side things. I think there's a lot of conversation about like, and maybe this is more in the NBA, but a lot of players like playing video games. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the era of when people grew up in, right? Like, and what does that do for you later in life? Um, it seemed like you're a very intuitive person about where you were going. What's one of the things like that you played that you didn't know? And I know you mentioned taxes, and maybe that is the thing that you didn't know that you thought you should know. You know, that you kind of really learned when you were playing and you got out of playing.
Yeah, no, taxes is definitely at the top of my list just because I didn't understand filing, deadlines, extensions. I definitely didn't understand write-offs, what that meant at the
Yeah.
time. You know, like if you're spending on equipment that you use, you know, for your work at that time, you know, you could write those things off and get a return. What is that? What is a return? What does that even mean? Because that kind of changed the game for me in terms of, okay, now I nobody wants to do them, but I feel comfortable during this season because I know what it entails. And I can track now
Right.
throughout the year instead of waiting until April to go through everything and try to do it all at once. That sort of allows it to be a much smoother process.
You're also very charitable, right? Which
Hmm. Hmm.
technically does play a lot into an individual or a business's taxes. Talk about that. How did you get into working and doing a lot for charity, and now you're an employee of
Hmm.
a charitable foundation? How did that become a part of your life?
Yeah, you know, I'm actually really glad that you asked this question because this is another huge learning like aspect for pro athletes. We all, for the most part, want to give back to our communities. I wanted to give back to my community where I grew up because I felt like I wouldn't have accomplished the things that I did without them, without the coaches, without my friends and teammates and teachers and all the people that had a positive influence in my life. I was one of those kids, was fortunate. I grew up in the same house, K through 12, you know, and so people that were there had an impact on me and guided me. Even the teacher that said that I needed to be more realistic about what I wanted to do with my life when I told her I wanted to be a pro athlete. That was
Mm.
inspiring enough. It drove me to keep going. It didn't discourage me. Giving back is a huge thing. I had two sisters, one with MS, one who had cerebral palsy. And so giving back to those causes was really important to me as well. And so I started a nonprofit called Running for You. And I started it under the umbrella of a bigger nonprofit called the Seattle Foundation. Now, I didn't know what that meant at first. When you're under the umbrella, they're your fiscal sponsor, which I didn't know what that
Right.
meant either, you know, at the time. All I knew is that I wanted to do something for the youth in my community. That's it. But I'm the executive director for Sports in Schools, nonprofit based in Seattle. And in this role, I have a board. There's a board of directors that essentially runs the nonprofit. I didn't have that
Yep.
when I had my nonprofit. These are common mistakes that guys like us, you know, we make. That board of directors then goes out and they hire an executive director. That's the role that I serve in now. Then, depending on what your funds look like alongside of the board, can go and hire programs and impact coordinator or whatever the role is, right? You're running a business. It's a nonprofit, but it's a business. And that's just knowledge that, if not given, which most of us aren't, then you're not doing it correctly. And what happens when you're not doing it correctly, Paul, is that you end up, you know, using a lot of your own resources to do things. And that's not the way to do it. So when I did camps,
Right.
I used to do football camps. I did charity events for basketball. Guess who footed all those bills? That's that. And
Yeah.
that's what happens with guys at the end, and where they're sitting around and they're saying, man, what happened? And the assumption is, you know, it's all chains and fancy cars, but it's actually mistakes made you were trying to do something good, but you're supposed to use sponsors and donors and things of that nature for all of those things, and it just goes over our heads because of lack of knowledge.
One question I was going to ask you, you basically answered, was what's the biggest misconception about pro athletes, right? And I think the thing that you stated that really sat with me is that you want to give back to the places, the organizations, the people that got you in that position.
That's actually the
You
second.
mentioned,
That's actually the second biggest
yeah,
misconception, though. The first one,
okay. What do you think's the first?
the first one is, it's very interesting, Paul. I mean, I'm glad you asked this question. Do you get at this? This is your first episode, man.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
This is the biggest misconception in sports with pro athletes and what happens with their, their finances and their portfolio. So the game is the game. The game takes a lot of preparation every year. You hear about guys like LeBron who spend X amount of $1 million on their body every year to keep themselves in tip-top shape. Everybody's doing that. Not everybody can afford $1 million, but they're maximizing.
Right.
They're maximizing on what they can afford to ensure that they are as ready as they can be to play and take advantage of their opportunity. Most guys. Now you got your guys who just playing and not being responsible. But for the most part, not the case. And so what happens is, Paul, you've got 1 year left on your deal. You got 1 year left on your contract, and you play the season. Let's say you're in a scenario where you get a contract extension. It's a 2-year extension. Okay. All right. And so you go all the off season and I don't know, you break an ankle before the season starts. So now you're out for the year.
Yeah.
Now in some negotiations, you either get half your salary for that season or you don't get it any at all. So it's a very interesting dynamic. Now, my point is, what happens is, because you're injured, the team says, hey, we're not going to be able to use you this year. You get cut. All right. So you get cut from the team, whatever. Or you don't get re-signed. All right. Your job as a pro athlete is to stay ready no matter what. Your agent is going to work. He's making phone calls. He's talking to GMs, president of football operations, scouts, etc. You still have to invest the same amount in yourself while you're a free agent. Why? Because if you get a call from the New York Jets and you're not in shape, well, whose fault is that? That's going to be on you. Coming to the building not ready. Okay? All right? And so what happens is, you go through that first season, you don't get a call, right? Maybe something happened at the end of the year. You played in like 2 games. That gives you a little bit of hope. So the next off season, it's the same drill. All the while, you still got life. You still have a mortgage,
Right.
and a car note and, kids' birthdays and Mother's Day and all the things that happen throughout the year, right? And so what happens is, the biggest misconception is that athletes spend all their money and it goes into cars and big chains and clubs. When the reality is there's a 2-year period where your career has ended, but you don't know. But you're staying prepared just in case it's not. But the investment in that's what happens. 2 years, no income, outcome, because you're investing in yourself to stay ready. A lot of folks on the outside don't know that. And that's the biggest misconception.
It's really interesting conversation, and you use the LeBron example. Like, I think of him as those, like, the top 1%, and probably even more than that, maybe the 0.5, 0.1% of athletes that are making way more, but everybody thinks it's the majority, right? Because he's on a different level than nearly any athlete in what they're able to get as a reward for their play. and what they've been able to do and how long he was able to play. And as you said, maximize his body. You talked about the misconception with the end. What was your moment when you knew that you were done playing?
Oh man, I played my last down. I played my last real down in 2018. It was the worst play I ever had in football. I had a hard time for a long time. I'm playing for the Colts. We're in New York at the Meadowlands playing against the Jets. It's a 3rd and 2. We run 15 duo, which is just, it's an inside play to the left side. I'm one of the best third down backs in the league. I converted about an 86, 87% rate. I think at the time it was first or second in the NFL over that 2-year span, 3-year span, 2016, 17, and 18. So, I get the ball, left side, Mike linebacker shoots through the A gap, and so it forces me to bounce to the outside. And when I get outside the tackle, there's 2 defenders. And I tried to make a spin move on those guys. And Jamal Adams, at the time, he was playing safety, puts the helmet right on the football. Football comes out. I try to recover it. As I'm trying to do that, I dislocate my right shoulder. And that was my last real play of football. And so the hard part, Paul, was that I can look in the mirror and know 100% with no doubt in my mind the dedication, the work ethic, and everything that I put into the game of football was genuine. I did not cut any corners, not ever. And so for that to be the last play was a very, 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 very hard thing for me to deal with, for a long time. So I didn't know my career was over at that time. I was released from the Colts shortly after that, like 3 or 4 weeks later. I just went back to my regiment. I went back to training and everything. I didn't get picked up that season. The off season comes around. I had one tryout with the Las Vegas Raiders, and I'm training. Nothing happens. I get signed to the Seahawks during the last month of the season in December. Okay, this is 2019. All right. So I'd missed most of the season. I get signed to the Seahawks. They had a lot of injuries at running back that year, and I didn't carry the ball at all. It was mostly special teams and some third down stuff that I did during that time. And then, we lost to the Green Bay Packers in the divisional round of the playoffs that year. But I'm feeling okay. I got signed to a team. I put some film out there, and I go through the whole 2020. Season ends in January. I'm back to it. I'm training, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm staying disciplined throughout the entirety of it. I even started a podcast, to start to kind of get ready for the transition a little bit. And I didn't get signed that year. And that's what I knew. See, the thing about an athlete is that, we're always coached to fight to the finish, to the end. And I was not going to quit until the regular season of that 2020 year was 100% absolutely over, which was after the first week of January. And so up until from January to January of 2020 to January of 2021, I put in absolutely everything possible.
How many hours a day were you working out?
It's an all day thing, Paul. Yeah. It's an all day thing. It's a 6 a.m. in the gym. Then it's an 8 o'clock PT session. Then it's a 10:30 session on the field. But then it's a little bit of a break. Then you get to the track, because I used to run with the USA track team. And then it's a track practice that starts at 1 o'clock. You go till 3, then you get a physical therapy session after that. We'll actually work out first, and from whatever it was, 3 to 4, and then you get a physical therapy session after that, and then I'm on my way home at 5:30, 6 o'clock. So it was an all day thing for many, many years.
So it's funny when you have like people in normal workforces, right? They complain about their job working 8 hours a day or whatever they do, right? And you're doing more than that. Just even to get the job that year.
Just even have a chance.
Yeah. This is the thing I always love about an athlete mentality is that there's a level of dedication that someone that wasn't an athlete just won't understand. So like that's why I asked you that question about how long you were working out. And I didn't even expect you to say that long, but I think about it like you said, you're maximizing your body, you're sculpting, you're building, you're getting everything you can out of it. I appreciate you sharing that. What do you think was that moment, right? So you didn't get signed. What was the hardest part? And do you think you were like ready for that, or how did you get yourself ready after that didn't happen?
Yeah. The hardest part was that it was the first time in my life I felt like a failure. Like we fail. I've had injuries. I've been stopped short at the 1 yard line to lose a game before. We fail, but it was the first time in my life that I thought to myself, I said, I guess hard work doesn't pay off the way that everybody says it did. Because I worked hard. I did everything. I was supposed to do. I was organized. I did everything, that I always did. And I didn't get another opportunity. And I just couldn't understand why that was for a long time. So I was not ready. I was not ready for that at all. And I had a very, very hard time dealing with that reality.
It's interesting too, because we talked about when you were playing that you were even preparing for when you were not playing.
Mm-hmm.
And even when it happened, it's really hard. I can't even imagine for somebody that isn't preparing, which those athletes are out there. Like, how did you get yourself to the place? And maybe this still sits with you, but how did you get yourself to the place where you were okay with when you were done playing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to go back, and because I mentioned the internships that I did at Pacific Sotheby's while I was playing, I also had my own radio show for 2 years when I played in Seattle called The Turbo Show. And I hosted a television show 1 year when I was at the Colts called the Sports Locker. And so, that really is what sort of got me prepared for, maybe broadcast could be an entryway for me post-career. The thing about your question in terms of being ready is that there's a difference between I guess not being ready or prepared and then not having something else that you can go to. I had that. At least I felt like that. I felt like I did have options. I could get into real estate. I was close to getting my license, or I could get into broadcast. I just wasn't ready for that. That's not what I wanted to do yet at 28, 29 years old. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep playing. So I had to go to therapy. I had to do 2 things. First thing I had to do was I had to swallow my pride a little bit and start engaging in other industries that had nothing to do with football. And whether they were internships or externships, I did an externship at Fanatics. And I thought, okay, maybe I could get a job at Fanatics. I did an externship at StubHub. I thought maybe that'd be interesting. The Fanatics one was down in Jacksonville. The StubHub was in San Francisco. So I'm like, okay, StubHub might be cool. You learn about the business of StubHub, and maybe that's something that I may be interested in getting into, etc. And so I dabbled in those things to kind of give me ideas. But it wasn't really until I went to therapy that I was able to actually believe that those other opportunities were attainable for me, and that I could be successful. I had no vision before that. I had absolutely no, I could not see a light at the end of the tunnel. But I was able to sit down with guys who were first round picks, who made millions of dollars with their second contracts, guys who were Hall of Famers even, that felt the same way as me. And I said, wow, I used to play, you were like one of the guys that on Madden that I, that I had, and now we're sitting here at this round table talking about the same situation that we're in together. And
Yeah.
that helped me come out of it.
You'll probably laugh at me, but I have that empathy, that moment where I'm feeling you just about my own pickup basketball games, where like I can't like even physically play anymore like the way I used to or I want to,
Mm-hmm.
but I know it's different. But I like feel everything you're saying, even just about something that small,
Mm-hmm.
and I think people should be able to understand the gravity of that, right? Like, because in some way this could feel like your identity, because you were doing it pretty much your whole life,
Mm-hmm.
fifth grade,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So there's the point of the conversation of the reinventing yourself, right? Like, now you're out there helping kids get access to sports that aren't in a life situation where they're able to.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're doing one of the things that you said, right? Giving it back to the community that you've been around. So I think like you're in an amazing place in the work you're doing outside of it. I know I brought you back there, but I wanted to just remind that moment for whoever is listening to this, right? When they listen to this, that like you got in a good place, but there's all this adversity in these conversations that you have to hit when you learn things in life, and you have to change something that you're not able to do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you've reinvented yourself, right?
That's right.
Like, so to walk me through that day you were working out January to January. What are those days looking like today?
Oh man, well, I'm still in, I still got to keep it tight, man, so I still keep I keep a gym routine, and that's part of it. That sets the tone for me, throughout the day. And it's interesting now because it's like, where at one point there was no light at the end of the tunnel, now there's multiple tunnels that I feel like I
Right.
can walk through, and there's light, and what's the next goal? I checked the box on this goal. This one I'm still working on. I'm on this path right now. What can I add to this, to keep like, this momentum going? And it's such a different, feeling, on a day to day, where it's just like, man, you're checking the box on goals and daily goals and weekly goals and monthly and things of that nature. And then you are also seeking new opportunities on a consistent basis. I remember when I was just trying to get one, you know, and this is why I have
Yeah.
so much love for the city of Seattle, because it only took one phone call for me to call the Seahawks and have an opportunity to be on their radio broadcast. That same thing, I called them in June. I was on the radio broadcast in September that same year, just to kind of get my broadcast career launched and get me on a path somewhere, you know. And so it's much different now. There's all kind of different lights at the end of multiple tunnels, and it's a cool space to be in.
So doubling down on what I was asking you, you're still working out, but you're not working out the whole day. And I know you're doing a lot of you're traveling a lot
Mm-hmm.
between what you're doing with CBS and broadcasting and obviously working with the nonprofit. Like, how much travel are you doing? And I know you mentioned family. So where's the balance?
Yeah, yeah. No, the balance part of it is really important. I'm traveling during the season. pretty much weekly. In the off season, it's every other week. But fortunately, Seattle's not that far, so I'm able to get to Seattle, be there less than 48 hours, get everything that I need to get done, and then get back, and juggle, walking the kids to school and coach my son's flag football team. And, we still have time to go to dinner and the movies, as a family and stuff like that. And so it's just about keeping the calendar sharp and managing time, because that's huge in terms of being able to get everything accomplished throughout a day. But I'm traveling quite a bit, but it's working out. It's working out nicely.
That's the part about family, right? Like, this about me, how I essentially reinvented myself and what I did for work in my career to be able to give myself that opportunity to sharpen that calendar, because I didn't feel like I had that opportunity. The fact that that already, right? Like you're ahead of the game, probably over a lot of others, and it's not an easy thing, because just like you probably played this way, whatever career you're in, like we want to go hard.
Mm-hmm.
We're competitive people. If you grew up playing sports, you want to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me personally, that's something that I love, is the competition. Do you find yourself missing competition or finding other ways to put yourself in competitive environments?
I miss playing football every day. I do. And so competing, man, there's nothing like it. So I play basketball. That's where I get my competitive juices out. You go out to those. I'll play in like some adult leagues, or get some runs in at the gym. Guys are playing, and I'm able to get those. If I didn't have that, then I might go crazy a little bit, But I also find myself competing with myself. Because the reality is, Paul, like, these other roles, being an executive director and, broadcast, and, I'm going to school at Indiana to get my MBA. These are challenges, though. As an executive director, like, I ask a lot of questions to my board, because a lot of them have a much more experience than me in the role that I'm playing. And so seeking that advice and seeking some of that knowledge is a part of the growth path that I'm still on. I don't have it all figured out, but I love the challenge of figuring out those things that I still may lack. And so it keeps the drive and the juice going every day.
So just a few more questions, and we'll kind of go into a current hot topic. So going back to where you are today and when you were playing, what would you tell your 22-year-old self?
Prepare for the end. I'd tell myself prepare for the end, and I'd also tell myself to really appreciate like where you are. And I don't think I did that good enough. Like I was so focused on the game that I think I missed out on opportunities to have fun. I didn't take trips. Teammates would invite me to go to Jamaica and this place and that place, and no, I gotta train, and the mindset of that is understandable, but you're missing out on unique opportunities when you do that. And so really to answer your question, the advice that I would give my 22-year-old self is don't miss out on the opportunities.
No, I think that's great advice for anybody. I think even just for somebody going to college, right? Like just the college experience. And then what do you think the biggest mistake other athletes are making after they retire?
After they retire, I think the biggest mistake that guys are making is actually before they retire. It's before they retire. It's towards, it's the prep for the end, like the real prep, the intentionality behind it. You haven't found your other thing. You can work 2 jobs in the off season, Paul. That's what I tell the young guys today. You're training 4, 5, 6 hours throughout the day. What are you doing for the other 6 hours? You mentioned it earlier. You're probably playing video games. So you're playing video games for 4 hours. You could have been working a part-time job for 4 hours, literally, and
Yep.
been building your portfolio at Microsoft or something like that. Just working part-time. You could be doing recruiting or something, like, and we just don't think that way. I got a couple of teammates who've done it excellently. And as they get prepared for their transition, it's going to be so easy for them because for 4, 5, 6 years, they've been doing another thing. They've been building a career in another space. And so when football's done, they're already transitioned. And so that's the thing that I
Yeah.
would encourage you guys, man. It's all football or nothing, and it can't be that way.
Great advice. I love that. So, hot topic. Completely outside of talking about you here. Let's talk about NILs for a little bit.
Okay.
And with NILs, you're obviously working in football, college football. Like, how would that have changed for you if you were able to get paid when you were at Utah State? Like, how would that have changed your journey? Would it have been better? Would it have been worse?
It would have been a lot better, I think, because I'd been a lot richer had I had NIL in college. I had some tough situations in college that I had to overcome, financially, and with NIL that wouldn't have existed. In fact, that's why NIL is alive and well now, because I wasn't the only one, and a group of alumni or whoever it was decided to do something about it. But it would have been way different. I get asked whether or not I would have transferred from Utah State. My dream school was Notre Dame. I don't know. I did have I would say I wouldn't have, because when I did have an opportunity to transfer, when the rules were different in 2008, I didn't. I decided to stay. So I think I would have probably stayed loyal to the soil. Yeah, things would have been a lot different. A lot different.
It's hard to find somebody not transferring now. So I think it's interesting you think about that. But I mean, the other side, why I say would it have been worse, is I think about how you went in the NFL preparing for life after the NFL. If you were getting paid in college, do you think you still would have had that mentality?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have still left when I left if everything would have mapped out the same way. I did have an opportunity to come back for another year, but that would have been my 6th year, which is actually pretty common nowadays. To me, it sounds crazy. Like I'm in college for a 6th year. I don't want to be in college for a 6th year, And so me with that mentality, I'm sure I would have still left. Left and got to the NFL.
Last question overall, and just about NILs. Do you think there needs to be more regulation around it, or do you think it's fine the way it is?
No, there definitely should be some regulation. Should be some, I guess, more responsibility on the player. Not in terms of loyalty, but if you do move, you may have to give some back. It's just like when a player gets a new contract but decides and then gets a signing bonus for $10 million, but then decides, oh, I don't want to play football anymore, I'm gonna retire. Well, you probably got to give at least 50% of that back to the team. You can't just take $10 million and retire.
Yeah.
And so there should be some regulation, I think around that, and maybe they should, build in some sort of salary cap or something like that. I don't know if that would help, or maybe that would help the institutions, but I think there should be some more organization around it. The thing that really has to get fixed is the transfer portal, more than anything.
Yeah. I want to ask another question about that, but I think we'll hold that for another time.
Okay.
I really appreciate you coming on and doing this with me. I learned a lot about you. I hope everybody else did too, but keep in mind we got a Super Bowl champion here that prepared for his life after, has become a family man, doing multiple things, giving back to his community and continually giving to the game of football. So I appreciate you. I'm glad to call you a friend, and I'm happy we got to do this.
All right, thanks for having me, man. Can't wait to come back for a second episode.